Nia lived in a small village called Obwolo, tucked between dusty roads and dry farmlands. Life was not easy. Her mother had been sick for years, and Nia, though just a teenager, was the one holding everything together. Every morning before school, she would wake up early to water their small garden and pick fresh vegetables. Then she'd carry them in a basket, walking miles to the market to sell them. The money she made was just enough for her mother's medicine and her school fees, when there was enough. Sometimes she'd sit in class with an empty stomach, pretending not to notice the hunger. But Nia was smart. Her teachers often said she had a mind sharper than most. She dreamed of being more, of building a business one day and taking her mother to a real hospital. One afternoon at the market, she met Mwamba. He was different. He wore shiny shoes and spoke with confidence. He said he was from Lusaka and had come to visit family. He smiled at her in a way no one ever had. He listened to her dreams and said things like, "You don't belong here, Nia. You deserve better." Mwamba became a regular face in her life, visiting often, bringing small gifts, promising her a future far from the dusty village and empty pockets. "Come to Lusaka with me," he said one day. "I'll take care of you. You'll never have to struggle again." Nia looked at her mother, looked at her tired hands, her tired life, and something inside her said maybe, just maybe, this was her chance. She didn't know then that this chance would break her before it built her. When Nia arrived in Lusaka, her heart was full of hope. The city lights, the tall buildings, the noise, it all felt like a new beginning. She had married Mwamba quietly, believing she was stepping into a better life. At first, everything felt like a dream. He took her shopping, bought her new clothes, even showed her off to his friends. She cooked for him, cleaned the little flat they rented, and imagined opening her own food business one day. "I'll start small," she told him once, "maybe with snacks or home meals." Mwamba just smiled and nodded, but soon that smile disappeared. The sweet words turned cold. "Why do you always talk about business? You think you're better than me?" he snapped one evening. Nia was shocked. It was the first time he raised his voice, but not the last. Days turned into weeks, and Mwamba changed more and more. He started calling her useless, lazy, even stupid. "Without me, you're nothing," he'd say. "Just a poor girl from a dusty village." Nia tried to keep the peace. She stayed quiet, hoping he'd go back to being the man who once made her feel seen. But instead, he got worse. When she mentioned going back to school or helping with a friend's food stall, Mwamba shouted, "No wife of mine is going to stand in the streets like a beggar." He locked her dreams in a cage and threw away the key. What was once love had turned into control, and Nia felt more trapped than ever. Nia couldn't let her dreams die, not completely. Even with Mwamba's cruel words and constant control, a small fire still burned inside her. Quietly, she began saving coins, just a little from the grocery money he gave her, or from change she found lying around. It took months, but eventually, she had just enough to join free night classes at a small community center nearby. Twice a week, after making dinner and pretending to sleep early, she'd sneak out with her books hidden in a bag. For the first time in a long while, she felt alive again. She was learning. She was hoping. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. One night, Mwamba came home earlier than expected. He found her empty bed, searched her things, and waited. When Nia walked in, tired but smiling, she found him standing in the middle of the room, her books scattered on the floor. His eyes were full of rage. "So this is what you do behind my back?" he shouted. Nia tried to explain, but he didn't want to listen. "You think you're better than me now. Without me, you'd be begging on the streets like a stray dog." Then came the worst moment of her life. He picked up her small bag, stuffed it with a few clothes, opened the door, and threw it outside. "Get out! Go chase your big dreams." Nia stood in the hallway, shaking, heartbroken, holding a bag and nothing else. It was raining. Her tears blended with the drops. But deep down, something told her this wasn't the end. Nia walked through the rain that night with nowhere to go. Her phone battery was almost dead. Her clothes were soaked, and her heart felt even heavier than her bag. She thought of only one person, Zanele, her old friend from school who now lived in Lusaka. They hadn't spoken in a while, but Nia had no one else. She called her, voice shaking, and without asking too many questions, Zanele said, "Come, my door is open." Zanele lived in a tiny one-room flat, but she made space for Nia. A mattress on the floor, warm food, and something even more powerful, kindness. For the first time in weeks, Nia felt safe, but she knew she couldn't live off her friend's help forever. She had to do something. With Zanele's support, Nia started cooking snacks, fritters, samosas, roasted groundnuts, and packing them neatly in small plastic bags. Every morning, she stood at busy bus stations, smiling at strangers, calling out her offers. It wasn't easy. Some people ignored her, some laughed, but a few bought, and that was enough to keep going. Soon, people started coming back, asking for more. They liked her food. That gave her an idea. She printed a simple flyer and offered catering for small events, birthday parties, baby showers, even funerals. She called it Nia's Kitchen. She had no fancy kitchen, no money, but she had fire, both in her heart and in her cooking. From couch surfing to street selling, Nia was slowly rising, one plate at a time. Nia's little business was starting to grow. One day, a woman who ran a small office called her and placed a big order, snacks and lunch for a team meeting. It was the biggest deal Nia had ever gotten. She stayed up all night cooking, carefully packed everything, and even borrowed bus fare just to deliver it on time. The office workers smiled, enjoyed the food, and the woman promised, "I'll send your payment by evening." But evening came and went. Then another day, then a week. No payment, no reply. The woman blocked her number. Nia was crushed. All the money she had put into that order, gone. She couldn't even afford ingredients now. She went back to sleeping on Zanele's floor, feeling like she had failed again. Some nights she cried quietly, trying not to wake her friend. But even in that dark moment, Nia refused to give up. She started walking to a nearby community center that offered free Wi-Fi and business workshops. She didn't have a laptop, so she used an old phone with a cracked screen, sitting in the back of the room and taking notes. She listened to everything: how to write a business plan, how to deal with clients, how to build a brand. It was hard, but she showed up every day. She was broke, tired, and heartbroken, but still learning, still dreaming. Nia knew one thing for sure: the world may knock her down, but it would never keep her there. One afternoon at the community center, Nia saw a flyer taped to the wall. It read, "Women's Entrepreneurship Challenge. Share your business idea. Win funding." Her heart skipped. She almost walked away, thinking she wasn't ready. But something inside her whispered, "Try anyway." That night, she stayed up writing her idea on a borrowed notebook. Mama Flame Foods, a small food brand focused on tasty, home-cooked Zambian meals with a modern twist. She wanted to bring back the flavors of childhood, the warmth of home, especially for people working far from their villages. With help from one of the trainers, she submitted her idea. A few weeks later, she was shocked to be selected as one of the finalists. She didn't have fancy slides or business terms. She just stood in front of a small crowd and told her story, with honesty, with tears, and with passion. She spoke about sleeping on floors, about cooking with borrowed pots, and how she wanted to use food to help women like her rise. She didn't win first place, but she won second, and with that came a small grant and mentorship. It wasn't millions, but to Nia, it felt like a million dreams waking up. She used the money to buy proper cooking equipment, packaging, and her first branded apron. She printed stickers with her new logo, Mama Flame Foods. Just like that, her dream had a name and a fire that couldn't be put out. The rise had truly begun. Nia was busy packing lunchboxes one morning when she got a message on her phone. It was from a writer at a well-known African women's magazine. "I heard about your story through the Entrepreneurship Challenge," it said. "We'd love to feature you." Nia stared at the message in disbelief. She read it twice, then a third time. Could this be real? A week later, her photo and story were on the cover of the magazine, under the headline, "From Rock Bottom to Mama Flame, the woman feeding hope." The article told everything: how she was thrown out with nothing, how she started with snacks on the street, and how she refused to quit. People across the country read it. Then they started following her, then ordering. Within days, her phone couldn't stop buzzing. She went from 10 orders a week to hundreds. She couldn't cook alone anymore, so she started hiring. But not just anyone. She went back to the communities where women were struggling, just like she once had. She hired 30 women, trained them, and gave them fair pay. For many, it was their first real job. Soon, she opened her first small office and kitchen space. It had a sign on the door that read, "Mama Flame Foods, made with heart." Inside, laughter filled the air, pots bubbled with spice, and the women she hired worked with pride. Nia wasn't just feeding people anymore. She was feeding dreams, including her own. It was a cold, rainy evening in Lusaka. The team at Mama Flame Foods had just finished a long day, and Nia was the last to leave the office. She grabbed her umbrella, turned off the lights, and walked toward the door, then stopped. Through the glass, she saw a figure standing outside, soaked from head to toe, shivering. At first, she couldn't see his face clearly, but then he looked up. It was Mwamba. Her heart skipped. For a moment, she didn't move. He looked nothing like the man she once knew. His clothes were worn out, his shoes muddy, his eyes tired and hollow. He didn't speak right away, just stood there, like a ghost from a past she thought she had buried. Finally, he opened his mouth. "Nia, I need help." She couldn't believe it. The same man who once called her useless, the same man who threw her out with only a bag and no money, now standing in front of her, broken and desperate. Through chattering teeth, he explained how his second wife had left him, how he had lost his job, how life had humbled him in ways he never expected. Nia looked at him, her mind racing with old memories. The pain, the nights she cried, the hunger, the hustle. But standing there now, successful and strong, she didn't feel anger, just silence and power. She opened the door slowly, not to welcome the past, but to show it what grace looks like. Nia looked at Mwamba for a long moment. She could see the shame in his eyes, the way he avoided her gaze, soaked by the rain and his regrets. A part of her remembered the pain, his words, the nights she cried on the floor, the way he made her feel small. But another part of her had grown far beyond that hurt. She had healed, and now she stood on higher ground. She didn't shout. She didn't throw insults like he once did. Instead, she stepped aside and said gently, "Come in." She made him a cup of tea and let him warm up. He kept saying, "I don't expect much. I don't know where else to go." After a quiet pause, Nia looked him in the eye and said, "I can't change the past, Mwamba, but I can give you a chance." She offered him a part-time delivery job, carrying food orders on a bicycle, the same way she had once walked bus station to bus station with snacks in a bag. He looked surprised, almost too ashamed to accept, but she continued, "You once made me beg. Now I empower beggars to rise." There was no hate in her voice, just truth, strength, and grace. Mwamba nodded slowly, tears filling his eyes. He had never imagined the girl he once mocked would become the one to save him. And Nia? She didn't do it for revenge. She did it because rising doesn't mean stepping on others. It means lifting them too. Big billboards now stood tall across Lusaka with Nia's face on them, smiling, confident, wearing her signature apron with the words, "Mama Flame Foods, made with heart." People pointed at them and said, "That's the woman who came from nothing." She was no longer just a business owner. She had become a symbol of strength, hope, and second chances. She was now invited to speak at big events, where she stood on stage in front of hundreds, sharing her journey. Her talks weren't fancy, but they were real. She spoke about sleeping on floors, being betrayed, building from scratch, and choosing grace over revenge. "You are not what happens to you," she would say. "You are what you choose to become after it." At one of her biggest events, she walked onto the stage as the crowd clapped. But somewhere in the back row, hidden among the faces, sat Mwamba. He didn't clap, he just watched, quietly, like a shadow of the past. The girl he once called useless now stood untouchable, shining, strong, and powerful. And Nia, she didn't look for him in the crowd. She didn't need to. Her light was no longer about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving to herself, and every girl like her, that rising is possible, always.